Today's video is going to be the second part of the Stihl 028 rebuild. I'm going to be replacing the crank bearings and seals and putting the bottom end back together. Put the crank in and seal it all up. So here we go. Alright, the first thing that you want to do is take out the seal from the bearing so that it'll come out the other side. We can tap on it if we need to. This is the clutch side where the chain is, and it should just pop right out. I have a pick here and maybe a screwdriver if I need it. Not worried about damaging the old bearing. There it is. As you can see, it was pretty messed up, and definitely, some of that was probably me just now, but definitely needed a repair. So here we go. You can see the bearing. Next thing you want to do is take note of how far the bearing is in. So this is almost flush, just maybe a little bit out, and the writing is on this side. I like to keep the writing here, and as you can see, the open part of the bearing and then the sealed part of the bearing here. So we'll do the same thing with this one here. You can see this is the flywheel side, smaller. This is sitting not quite as flush, so even a little more out. Let's go ahead and grab this seal out. There we go, I just had to tap it out with the punch. You're going to check and make sure you don't score any of this up, or you're going to have to smooth it back out because that will need to be sealed up good. Now that the seals are out, I'm going to use a hot plate to heat these cases up for about 15 minutes on high so that the bearings should just fall out of there. Because I do not want to beat on them too much. So I'm going to turn them on to high and we'll come back in 15 minutes. Okay, they've been heating up for a while. I'm just going to put it on here. It's about 300 degrees and it literally just fell out of there. It was that easy. There it is. Okay, I'm going to try to tap the clutch side out now. Easy as that. Alright, now we have both bearings out. I'm going to go ahead and clean these all up one more time and we'll be ready to install the new ones. Okay, I got the cases cleaned up. I took Scotch-Brite and went all around here to check and make sure everything was good. And then I also cleaned off all of this gasket ready for mating and did the same over here. So now I'm going to work on putting the bearings in. All I'm going to do is work one at a time. Just put this on the hot plate to about 300 and the new one should drop right in. Okay, my case is about 300, a little under. I'm gonna set it down. I'm gonna grab this. This came out of the freezer. The writing up. And there, boom. Went right in. That's all you need. Give it a tiny tap if I have to, but I don't think I need to at all. I'm just gonna give it a tap for sanity. Gonna put this on here. Yeah, that's seated all the way down, as you can see, writing on the inside just like it was. So now we'll do the same on the other side. Okay, we'll try to slip the other side in now. There we go. Just like that. Again, I'll tap it for sanity, but it's down, it's seated. In my opinion, this is the way bearings should be done. Now I'll let them cool down. I'm gonna put some assembly lube in them. Since I did have these in the freezer, there's gonna be some condensation. So right now I'm just gonna let everything cool down. Okay, I heated this up a little bit. I have my crank. This is the flywheel side that I'm going to put in first, and I'm hoping that I can just push it in There we go. Just like that. Nothing to it. No beating on it. No pulling it through. It's good to go. Nice and lined up. Bearing is working really nice. Okay, now we'll get the gasket maker on and the gasket ready and put the dowel pins in and set up for the other side. Okay, the next thing I'm going to use is this ultra black gasket maker. I'm going to put a very thin coat on each side and then put my locating pins in, the dowels, and then finally I'll put the gasket on, and then we'll pull the cases all together. I almost forgot to put the oil pickup tube on. Like I said, almost nothing. You just want to barely coat it. Not everyone does this, but I prefer it. I don't think, as long as you don't overdo it, I don't think there's anything bad about it. You know, some people gunk it all up and get it all in the case and everything else. But if you know what you're doing, it's good insurance. Like I said, just very thin, almost wipe it away. Now I'm going to put the locating pins in. Just going to tap this in a tiny bit. About like that. Okay. Now we have our gasket. Like that. And this gasket maker also helps this gasket stay in place, which I find very helpful. Okay, I have my oil pickup tube in, gasket maker on both sides. I have my gasket on. So now I'm just going to very carefully start this. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use, if I can, my flywheel. You gotta make sure you're lining up your locating pins. Okay, I've started the case together, got it good with the flywheel, got it close enough. Now what I'm going to go ahead and do is run in all of these bolts, and I'll just slowly tighten them up, like one turn at a time, until we slowly close it all up. You don't want to force anything. You just slowly tighten them up. And you want to tighten them up evenly, so you don't want to tighten all of these right here. You got to watch the front and the back and everything. So I'll try to give you a top view while I'm doing this. It's coming together really easily. See, a lot of guys try to pull everything through and do weird stuff, but I found that using the flywheel is right up against the brace to get it started, and then I think pulling it through with these screws is about as even a pressure as you're going to get all the way through. Okay, that's pretty much it. I'm going to go through and tighten these up a little more, and I'll come back for the seals. Okay, I've tightened it up a whole bunch. I triple checked everything. You just want to keep going through, making sure they're all tight. Make sure your dowel pins in the front and the back are as even as you can get them. And then just make sure your crank moves freely. Mine feels really good. Like I said, when you don't beat on them, I feel like you don't get them all bound up. So now, case bottom end is pretty much together here. All right, the last thing I'm gonna do today is put these oil seals in, the crank seals. They're gonna go in the curve side down. I'm going to use basically just a huge socket that's going to fit over here, and it's going to fit flush. So it fits inside of this outer piece, but does not fit inside of the race of the bearing. And then I'm just going to tap it in. So I'm going to put a tiny little bit of assembly lube around it, around the inside. You always want to make sure your spring looks good. Put a little more around the outside just because you want it to slide in. And I already put a little bit of assembly lube in there. So I actually usually start it by hand like that just because you don't want to mess these up, or when you go to do the pressure test you're going to be replacing them. So I'm just going to go very slow, one hit at a time. I'm going to check, hit it again, and check, and so on and so forth. Getting there now, it's seated, so I'll go ahead and you can hear my socket hitting the metal. That means you know you've driven it home. You don't want to go too far because you want a little bit of space. Okay. There we go. One seal is done. You just want to move the crank, make sure you're good to go with that. Same thing for the flywheel side. Put a tiny little bit of assembly lube on the inside and outside just to help it slide in. Carefully slide it over. And if you're like me, I still have my woodruff key in here, so you got to be extra careful till it almost seats. Up my socket. There we go. And it's in. Alright, that's going to wrap it up for today. We're at a good stopping point. Today we removed the crank seals and bearings. We cleaned up the cases. We put our oil pickup tube back on. put new bearings in. Then we did the gasket and the gasket maker. We put the flywheel side in first. We put our dowels in and we drew the case up tight and then put our seals on. So everything's looking good. The crank's really smooth right now. Happy with it. So next time we're gonna work on putting the top end on, maybe the clutch or the flywheel side, and we'll just make sure that there's no leaks in it. We'll do a pressure test and a vacuum test, and then we'll move on with the rest of the build. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.